about groups. And I definitely love group counseling. So I am so excited for those of you who are joining us that we have Rachel Davis with us from Bright Futures Counseling.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're all excited for that. So Rachel, do you want to just share with everyone just a little bit about yourself and what's kind of going on right now?
Sure, yeah. So I'm Rachel, and my brand TPT store blog, everything's Bright Futures Counseling. So you may know me from there. I'm originally from Georgia, so I feel like I have to always preface it with that because I have a little bit of a Southern accent. So if I start to talk about California or Costa Rica, people kind of get caught off guard. So originally from Georgia, then I moved to San Diego for grad school, and then that's where I ended up being a school counselor. So I had my first school counseling job at an elementary school there. I was actually split between two schools. Loved it. It was awesome. But then my husband and I are big travelers. So we decided we want to take some time off to travel before we had kids. So we kind of like packed up everything, traveled for a couple years, and then ended up relocating to Costa Rica, where I was then a school counselor at an international school here. And that was at a K-12 school. So that was a cool experience because I had done like internships at middle and high, but most of my experience had been previously in elementary. So and the international school was also private, so it was a big contrast to the public schools I had worked in. So I feel like I got a really well-rounded experience from there. And then, so that was 2019, 2020 school year. And then I was pregnant, and then it was COVID, and I had my maternity leave. And then I ended up just staying home with my son the following year. And now I'm pregnant again, so I was staying home again. But yeah, so now I just like to serve counselors through my blog. I have a podcast called School Counseling Simplified. And yeah, that's about it.
Great. Awesome. So Rachel, I'm going to have you send me some of those links later so that I can post them. So, all right. So friends, we're here to talk about group counseling and kind of wrapping up the school year and terminating groups. So Rachel, I have a question for you. Are you ready?
Okay.
And guys, I want you to know, I did not share with Rachel any of these questions. So she really ahead of time.
On the spot.
Yeah, she's totally on the spot here. So if we might have to give her a minute to think about some of these things, and that's okay. But how do you think terminating your counseling groups at the end of the year might be a little bit different than during the school year? Like if you end in like the middle of the year or 8 weeks into it, or
Right. No, that's a great question because I do keep it pretty consistent across the board. But I would say one thing that's different is at the end of the year, you want to make sure that they have any additional supports they may need during summer. So whether that be like connecting them like with some free resources that they can use over the summer, or talking with parents and kind of seeing what the plan is, because they're going to have a big, 2-month gap where they're not going to be receiving any services. So we want to make sure that they're getting that extra support. Whereas if you're ending a group in like March or something, you could always check in a couple weeks later, pop in their class, see how things are doing. So I feel like just as teachers are trying to make sure everything sticks, over the summer, so there's not having to reteach too much in the fall. I feel like it's kind of the same for us with our small groups.
Right. I always feel a little bit guiltier. I don't know, maybe this is just me, but when I end groups at the end of the year versus in the middle, because I feel like, yeah, we're just sending them out. And if it's in the middle of the year, I know I'm still there. Right? Or there's other counselors that are still there, but in the summer, when it's over, it's over.
Yeah.
Out into the wilds they go.
Yeah, I agree. Exactly.
So, do you do any type of like fun activities to end your groups, or what do you do?
Yeah.
End them?
I love to have like a celebration or a party. I always think that's fun because I remember growing up, I feel like all the class parties, they're so fun, right? So I'm like, just because I'm a counselor, I still want to have a class party. So I do two things. Well, specifically at the end of the year, I kind of have like a big counseling party for my groups and individuals. And what I'll do is kind of set aside 2 or 3 days, usually 2 days at the end of the school year. And then I'll have the groups are easier because they can just come in their scheduled group time and they're all together. Then the individuals, they'll kind of have them like pop in throughout the day. And hopefully there's other kids there too, so they can kind of play together. But I'll have like music and games and some coloring sheets and some kind of treat, or snack or donuts or something. And just to kind of celebrate their progress. Because I always like the kids to feel like it's an accomplishment and that they've achieved a goal. So I, really want to reduce like the negative stigma around counseling, that something's like wrong with them and that's why they're seeing us. But instead it's like a celebration of all that they've learned. And now, maybe before our group, they weren't able to identify coping strategies, but now they can. So I think it's super important to celebrate the little things. And with the little guys, I like to do certificates. I know they really like getting those and they're proud and they can go show them to their parents. So I think even little things like that go a long way. Something else I like to do at the parties is have all the group members write their name on like a piece of construction paper or poster board. And then the other group members kind of walk around the room and write like positive comments or kind words about that person on their paper. So then they get to take it home. So they have a poster of their name they could hang up somewhere with all of these kind words. And I try to encourage them to not just say like, you're funny, you're nice, but to write meaningful comments. So we'll go over a few examples of what they could do.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think I I used to do something similar, but with like, I would take their photo and then like their little group photo. And then I found these really cute frames when you're at the dollar store. They were magnetic and they had a nice little border on the outside. So the picture went in and then it had the border and they were just like, refrigerator magnet type things. And then they would do the same thing. They would write little positive messages, but now I can't find them with the big thick border.
Oh,
yeah.
I love the idea of the photo though. That's great.
So yeah.
Kind of like a mini yearbook.
Yeah, kind of. Here, take it with you.
Yeah.
Somewhere fun. So yeah. What tips do you have for everyone for ending your groups? Because I think sometimes it's really hard for people, like they have them for so long and then it's kind of like it's over. And then how do you really plan for that last group? If you're going to have like a little celebration and you want to get some like evaluations done and things like that, how do you plan your last session?
Yeah. So I think a lot of it has to do with before your last session. So in order to have a successful last session, I think it's like the prepping beforehand. So I made the mistake my first year of, you're doing a million things. And then I would always put in my Google Calendar, like, okay, I'm seeing this group for 8 weeks or something. And then I realized that it's 8 weeks and I'm like, oh, hey guys, it's our last session. And they're like, what? And I freak out. No, don't recommend doing that. So I think it's really important to prep them. So I like to use a group progress tracker. So I actually learned this in my internship from a lady I interned with, and I loved it. I think she used the same one with every group. She had like this ice cream cone and she would laminate it and then it had Velcro, and each week she would put a scoop, on the cone. So it was a very visual way for the kids to see like, oh, we have 6 sessions total. We have 3 scoops. We have 3 more scoops to go. So I loved that idea. And then I kind of started making it my own by personalizing it for the group. So I love to have like a theme for my groups. I'm all about like a theme and a catchy name. So if I'm doing like a self-control group, I would call it wiggle worms or something. So then I would have like a worm or you can do the interest of your group. So if your kids are really into like Legos or something, you could make it like Lego themed, make it fun to kind of get their, attention and buy-in and everything. But then you can kind of remind them like, oh, look, we've already done this many sessions. This is how many we have remaining. And it ends up kind of being a cool way to incentivize attendance as well, because they don't want to miss, like putting the thing up there or getting a completion sticker. I'll like also do stickers on their folders so they can kind of see how many sessions they've been to. And you would be surprised at the elementary level, the kids will be like, why does she have 4 stickers and I only have 3 stickers? And, we're like, well, we missed you last week. You didn't come because, you forgot or whatever. So that's a really cool thing I recommend doing is the progress tracker. So then when that last session comes, they kind of feel prepared. And you can even have those conversations, like, what are you guys going to miss about the group? Or how do you feel like you've grown since the group? That's something you could definitely journal too. You could have the kids do a journal of, how they feel like they've changed from the beginning to the end. And regarding data, I know you've mentioned that a little bit. So I love chatting about data collection. So my 2 like go-to things that I use for groups are self-assessments and then behavior surveys. So I love to send for the kids self-assessment. So in session 1, we'll have a self-assessment and I like to align it each statement aligns to the objective that we're going over. So for example, with the self-control group, week 1 may just be, what is self-control? We're trying to define self-control. And week 2 may be coping strategies, naming 3 coping strategies. So your self-assessment would say something like, I know what self-control is, yes or no. Or I can name 3 coping strategies, yes or no. So you do that during the first session. And then in your last session, you do the same thing. And then you can really compare the data and see, hopefully they didn't know it before, but now they know it. So that's really exciting. And then you can use that data to determine what to do next. But before I tell you that, I'll tell you the second one I like, and that's the behavior surveys. And those I love to send to parents and teachers at the beginning of sessions. And so the self-assessment is worded like very simply, it's directed toward the kid. I'm assuming you're working at like elementary level. But the behavior surveys are going to be for the parents and teachers. And it would say things like, student, knows how to calm down when feeling upset, or the student can successfully do 3 coping strategies or whatever. And so they're going to measure that. And I love to get the full picture of at home and at school, because you would be surprised, maybe at home they're able to do things better than they are at school, or vice versa. So it's really cool to get the parents' perspective, the teacher's perspective, and then the student's perspective on their self-assessment. And then of course you have your own observations from facilitating the group. So using all that data at the end of your last session, or rather after the session, you'll gather the data, and then you might have to hunt down the parents and teachers to get those forms back, but it's worth it, because once you get them, then you can decide next steps. So that's where you could decide like, okay, it looks like they've, progressed. Everything's looking better at home and school, and they got, their self-assessments looking better. I think that they don't need a group anymore. Maybe we can just go back where they're getting that tier 1 class lesson intervention with everyone else. And you can still check in from time to time. But if you notice that, they're not really improving, then you can say, okay, how can I continue to support this student? Do they maybe need individual counseling on self-control next year? Or do they need another group? Or, how can I present this in a different way where they can better understand it? So that's how I kind of like to get prepared for my last session.
Right. I like how you called the surveys to the parents and the teachers behavior surveys, because mine are simply parent survey and teacher survey. But
Yeah.
I never thought to say behavior survey. I know that.
Well, that works too. Yeah, no, I like it because you're actually talking about like the different behavior. I should have provided an example. Maybe I can send you one, but because off the top of my head, I can't really think of them, but it's like the actual behaviors that the child's exhibiting really at home or at school.
Exactly. So yeah, I don't know why I never thought of just calling it a behavior survey, but yeah, it's just parent and teacher, but it sounds very, very similar.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love that you align your pre and post test with your objectives, because I'm a trainer in New York, for NISCA, and like that, I'm harping on that like all the time. So
yeah. And it's a great way for you to measure, because sometimes you may see the self-assessments and everyone's like improving. And then there's one question like everyone gets wrong and you're like, whoa, what's going on? And maybe you're the problem. Maybe you didn't explain it in a way that the kids were able to grasp. So maybe you need to revisit that session. Maybe it's not, what are the chances that all the kids got that one wrong? So they're really insightful. And just a tip for the parent teacher surveys, I love offering a digital version as well. You can easily make one using like Google Forms, because then I find like you're more likely to get them back, because if you send home the paper, then they get lost in the backpack. You know how it goes.
That's not coming back. That is totally not coming back. Yeah, Google.
Yeah, but if it's a quick link, they can do it. Yeah.
Yeah, been there, done that. Get it. So, what other tips can you share with everyone? Do you have any other little golden tidbits there?
I feel like that's everything I do. I don't know. I'm trying to think. Maybe people have some questions that could spark my brain, but yeah, I think I just, I like to prepare the kids. I think the journaling, like a reflection piece, I didn't touch on that too much earlier, but I do think it's important during that last session, what you're going to do. So that's what, yeah, this is good. So instead of For example, we talked about objectives. So one week your objective may be, I'm going to teach these coping strategies. And the next week, maybe they're going to identify people in their support system they can go to, when they need help with a coping strategy. During that last session, I like to always have like an introduction session and then like a reflection session, because you don't want to leave the last session just like full of teaching or full of a brand new concept. You want to give them some time to kind of absorb everything that they've already learned. So you could do like definitely like a private journal part, but maybe for the group activity, like a discussion dice or some discussion cards where they're reflecting on, do you remember from session 1 when we talked about this? What did you think of that? Yeah. I also like to you can use like student rating scales throughout the group. So each week they can kind of rate how they feel like they're doing with their own progress. So this is different than the self-assessment because it's not really objective, it's like subjective. So I like a great easy example to explain this one is with grief. So because we all know that grief, you're not just going to heal like linearly after the group, you're not just better. But I like kids to kind of reflect on how their grief's going. So they would do like, I'm a 2 out of 10, or I'm a 4 out of 10, then I'm back to a 1, then I'm a 7. And then you can kind of connect the lines and it looks like a roller coaster. And so it's kind of cool at the end of the sessions, maybe you have the kids doing like the fun posters we talked about or some kind of fun closure activity. And then you can pull them aside one by one and kind of look at their progress, their self-reflection, and kind of think like, so what did you think? How are you ending it? Do you feel like your overall growth has been like, let's look at some trends. Like it looks like, every other week, or the weeks you stayed at dad's house, you answered this way. And the weeks you stayed at mom's house, you answered this way. It's just interesting to kind of show them the big picture too, and get them involved in their own data and their own learning.
Yeah, no, I love that. I definitely think kids need to be a part of that because they need to have that ownership. They need to take that and say, oh, I own that. And I also own how I change my behavior or how I changed my thought patterns. So that's really important.
Yeah, giving that ownership. And then, like we said earlier, celebrating with them. Because it's a good thing. It's exciting. Yeah. I always say I know I'm doing my job well if I'm putting myself out of a job. Like if there's no referrals coming in because everyone's just perfect.
I don't know. I think there's always room, no matter how much you change, help kids move towards something. This is really off the cuff here, but it just made our conversation right now just made me think about some of the ways to use the data that maybe you wouldn't have thought to use it for. So for example, one time, this was when I was a middle school counselor, my admin said to me, listen, we are running a project Lead the Way. Do you know what Project Lead the Way is?
No, I don't think so.
It's like a high school course. It's usually run with like a university in New York. Ours is run with usually Rochester Institute of Technology. And the kids in high school can earn high school and college credit for the course. And usually it's in like engineering and STEM and things like that. And so our district had just purchased all this equipment to start this STEM lab. And as the middle school counselor, they tasked me with having females enroll into the program because we had the program for 2 years and we had 24 spots and 24 out of 24 spots were always held by males. So they're like, you have to increase that number. So I ran some self-esteem groups and then I tracked how many kids were going into the STEM program. And so the 1 year I actually made it up to 13 females in it. And I was like, woohoo, look, I did something really great.
That's amazing. Yes.
So, yeah. So like, is there any type of like data that you said, wow, I made this improvement in things in a way that like, I don't think most people would never have thought of?
Yeah, I think, like you were saying, you can kind of look at the school data, like where the deficits are, and then determine how you're going to do your group to achieve that. So you mentioned like there weren't any females in the STEM program. So that was a problem and then you solved it. So I know your admin would probably love it if you asked them like, how can I help us improve attendance data or like, behavior referrals? Can we reduce those? So for example, the behavior referrals, let's say you tell your admin that you're going to try to implement a few groups to reduce behavior referrals. So you can you choose those students who have the high referrals, and then, try to get to the source of why they're always being referred for behaviors. So perhaps it's self-control, like we said earlier. So they're unable to show self-control in the classroom, so they keep getting in trouble and they keep getting referred out. So I think that's a good example of how you could then run your self-control group. And while you're writing your objectives, you have those students in mind, with the end goal being that they're going to be able to like self-regulate or solve their problem inside the classroom, so their teacher doesn't have to send them out to the principal. And then hopefully you'll collect the data. And then as a result of your group, you can, then show your principal, look, these have gone down, right? So we've had less behavior incidents as a result of my counseling group. So I think if you find the problems that your school's having or the challenges, and then you can kind of form your groups off of that and then track your data. And that's a really cool way to see if it's working or not.
Right. And, I think the more ways that we track that type of data, the more we're going to have our jobs.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, oh, we can't let you go. Or, oh, maybe we should have another counselor, because if you can do this, imagine what two can do.
Right. Absolutely.
So data, my friends, is super, super important.
Yes.
Boy, our group is really quiet tonight. What do you think?
I saw we had like a couple people in the chat, I think. But
oh, Janie has her thumbs up. Do you want to say something, Janie? Go ahead. Ask a question.
I put my question in the chat. I wasn't sure if we were doing audio here, but really great to hear about the counseling projects that you're doing and the data. So my question was, at the end of the group, and I'm working with middle school, at the end of the group, where do you like to store the group work that the kids have been doing? And I'm especially asking about whenever we have worked on a goal that they wanted to achieve, and then they've been tracking their own progress, and at the end they feel like they've mastered these skills, or they have written some anecdotals and some comments about how they have achieved this one goal. So at the very end, who do you give that to? Do you like to give that to the teacher so the teacher can continue doing the work there? Do you pass that on to the parents to show them what they've done? Do you keep it in your counseling file for next year? What do you like to do with that stuff?
Rachel, do you want to answer that one
Sure.
first?
Yeah. I was like, I'm interested to hear what you say. I always send it home to parents, send it home with the kids. So for my groups, I like to have each student has a manila folder with their name on it. And then they may have stickers like showing, each time they come to session, they get a sticker. So again, kind of like a project or progress tracker, attendance incentivizer. And then I keep all their stuff in there, their journals, their activities, and I keep those in my office until the duration of the group's over. So after our 6 or 8 sessions, or however long we meet on our celebration day, as we're doing our reflection, they get to send it home or take it home, and then they can show their parents, this is what I've been working on in counseling. In turn, that kind of becomes a way to like advocate for our role, because they're like, oh, that's why you were missing class. That's what you were doing with that crazy lady. So, and I think the teachers is a great idea too. I typically just send it home with parents, because I feel like I'm more in contact with teachers more frequently than parents. But you could show that to teachers first and then send it home to parents. But yeah, that's what I typically do.
And I can say that I also use I use little pocket folders for my kiddos, and same basic thing. And we just put all their material in there, especially if we have, like, if I have a group that does worksheets, and not all my groups do, but occasionally I'll have them write on something. Or maybe they'll make like an I am poster, or we're talking about, in my one group, how to be good learners. And so they're putting together right now their priority lists of like what they need to accomplish. And then they're setting out schedules for themselves. And so we're putting all of that in their folders. And then, yeah, I give that to them at the very end. And sometimes they leave me little notes in there, and I return those to them as well too, because I don't like to keep anything, because I never want to be subpoenaed and have somebody say, hand me all your stuff. I want to have nothing, like nada, zilch, zero, all up here. And that's just me. That's just me though. The only thing I really keep are my attendance logs and my behavior trackers and my data collection sheets. And then I usually keep them in my group binder and keep them, usually for about a year, maybe two. If now that I'm with the wee little loves, I probably will be keeping them a little bit longer in case I have them coming to me multiple years, just so that I can track their data on a bigger picture.
Yeah, that's great. I don't like to keep anything either. And then and it just gets kind of junky.
Yeah. And my room is like a cubicle and I share it. So we can't have anything extra. There's just no room. So it's going. We got another question. So let me read this one out loud. So if I didn't do a pre-test for coping skills, do you have any post-tests that would still be valuable data?
Yeah, so I always tell people this because I feel like I always talk about data a lot at the end of the school year, and then counselors will say like, oh no, I haven't done any data collection. Is it too late? And I always say some data is better than no data. So obviously having the pre-test to compare the post-test to is ideal, but if not, you can still make one, today, if you're about to end your groups, send it and you can still pair it with your objectives. So you know what you've been working on each week with them. So you can at least send like a little questionnaire to see if they have learned that skill or not, and see if they're answering. So we don't know how they felt about that skill before the group. The chances are if they're in your group, they weren't doing great at it, like there was room for improvement. So it's still helpful to have that data. So I still encourage you to type up one to match each week what you worked on or those objectives.
Yep. And I totally agree. I know sometimes too, we put together these groups and we might not have it 100% planned out. We might be doing a little bit like as we go. I have one right now that I am doing it as I go. And so I didn't really have a pre-test. I just knew that these guys had some problems, and I'm going to do exactly what Rachel said. I have my objectives and I'm going to have my post-tests measure what I've tried to teach them, my learning standards each week. It's kind of like, if you want to compare it, it's kind of like a math teacher. They are not usually going to give a pre-test at the beginning of their unit. They're only going to have their formative assessment at the very end of the unit, right? And that formative assessment just measures what they were taught. So it's kind of the same thing. Just measure what you've taught them.
Right. Yeah, I absolutely agree.
So, all right. Do we have any other questions? You guys don't have to be quiet. We're here. We're ready. We're waiting. Nothing so far.
And I will say one thing, if you don't do your forms digitally, if you do paper copies, I do think it's helpful to put it all somewhere digitally, like you can type it up in a Google Sheet or something, or some kind of report, just so you have it, because I don't know, I just don't like papers. You're like all cluttered and then you're like looking through it. So it's nice to put it in a concise place. So then you could even add it up like numbers instead of on an individual level. So like 7 out of 10 students, said they know this skill, or you can kind of get those stats. And then those are like easier to share stats with your admin or with whoever than having just like a pile of papers you kind of have to sort through each time.
If you use the Google Forms, then you get that really nice graph.
Yes. Yeah. That's why I prefer the digital one, because it's even easier.
So, I have another question for you, as we're still talking about like assessments and things like that, and the parent and the teacher forms. Now, I know when I send out the forms, I send them out usually a month after my group ends, except with like my very end of the year group. It kind of goes with when the school year is over. But what do? Do you send them like immediately as the group's done, or do you wait a little span of time and then send them?
I do send them immediately. And it may not be immediately when I get them back, like I was saying before, but I do like what you're saying though, or I would be interested in maybe sending one immediately and then like a 6 week later kind of checkup or something. That could be cool, just to see how they're retaining everything, because maybe when it's fresh on their mind, how it is if you go to a conference or something and you come back and you're all fired up, but then like a month later you forgot everything.
Yeah.
So maybe it's like that for our kids, right? So now that you said that, that got me thinking that would be really cool to do like a certain allotted time, a month later, 6 weeks later or something. How is it still going?
Yeah.
Kind of like you do a check-in. Maybe you could pair it with an observation or something.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And I'm thinking, well, maybe I should start like you do, like send it right at the end and then have the send it again. It's valuable time in between there.
Yeah, like I said, the more data you can collect, the better, because it's just also helpful.
This is good, people. I'm learning stuff too. This is awesome.
Same.
And I love your ice cream scoop idea. That is like, oh my God, with those wee little things. How cute is that?
And then, you can make it where they get to put the scoop on, and then it's like, it's my turn to do the scoop. No, it's my turn.
Yeah, my kids come in and I'm just like, okay, we're on 6. We have 2 to go. But
Yeah.
I like the scoop idea better. That's so much nicer. It's a better.
Yeah, it's fun. I can't take the credit. Like I said, it was from the counselor I did my internship with.
Listen, it's okay to beg, borrow, and steal when it comes to school counseling. So that's fine. That's how we get better. We have one more little question popped in. Paula says, I love the idea of the ice cream chart with scoops for each meeting. Any other ideas for that visual for kids to know how the group is pacing?
Oh, no, I mean, that's all I really have. You could break it down into like what those objectives are, or like what your topic is each week. I guess that would be less visual, but if you're doing it maybe with like grades 3 to 5, or if you're with middle school students a little older, you could do that. I don't know. What do you think, Carol?
Yeah, I was trying to think of another type of visual. I don't know. In terms of, when the kids come in, I do have like a little thing that I do with them, like tell me how their day is. Usually they're high, they're low, they're in between. But other than that, I don't really keep track of that from week to week, so that they see where they're going. But that might be a really good idea to start including. So Paula, I think you're giving us ideas too.
Yeah, definitely.
And then there's one more question. How would you distinguish between a school counseling group and a cell group?
Yeah, so for me, they're kind of the same. I mean, I just form my groups based off referrals. So if I have parent referrals, teacher referrals, or if I personally know of a student, or if it's a student I worked with in individual counseling and now they need, based on their data, like a little less support, but still something, then I would move them to a group. So I don't really think that terminology really matters. I personally just call them like counseling small groups. But I think it would be the same thing in my opinion.
Right. And I think I would agree. I know in the middle school level, I used to call them my lunch bunch groups, but really they're all psychoeducational groups, right? We are teaching them a skill. They're coming to us as school counselors because, our biggest role is how to help them succeed academically, whether that's with their behavior or with their emotions or with their learning skills, right? We are doing something to show them how to take control of that. So really, I think any group that we do, even if it's how to play nice in the sandbox with their friend, it's all psychoeducational.
Right. I agree. We're trying to get them prepared so they can return to the classroom and succeed.
So awesome. All right. Any other questions? Going once, going twice, 3 times. All right. Well, I don't know about you, but I learned a lot tonight.
Yeah, it was great.
This was fun. I have some new ideas that I'm all excited for. And I'm excited, I think, to try sending out my forms to teachers. And I'm going to try that. I'm going to send them out twice, really. Maybe tweak it up a little bit, like my little evaluations for the parents and the teachers. So I think that's what I'm taking away from tonight.
Awesome. Yeah, I think it was super helpful. Thanks everyone for showing up. Yeah, it's always great to chat and see what everyone's up to.
All right. So for those of you who joined late, I know a few of you have, we have this recorded and I am going to be posting it in all of the Facebook groups. I don't know if I'll get it done tonight, but this week I will get it in there. And I'm going to have Rachel send me some of her contact info and her links. And You know what, Rachel, can you send me like your most favorite group, a link to your most favorite group too?
Oh, sure.
I'm sure our friends would love to see that as well. Hands up, who wants to see that? Oh, look at them all shoot up. Look at that.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, there we go. We got a couple.
Yeah, I'll be happy to do that. It's kind of tough to pick my favorite, but I got a few in mind.
Okay, perfect. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. And I hope that you come to our next counselor chat next week.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, everyone.